Hey, this is your Olympic hero, Kurt Angle, and you're listening to Top Rope Nation. Oh, it's true. It's damn true.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time!
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah!
I finished these fights.
Give me a hell yeah!
Top Rope Nation.
Learn to love it. It's the best thing going today.
Summer is in full swing. New Japan has the G1 on the horizon. AEW is ramping up. We got their tickets for All Out going on sale tomorrow. And WWE is, well, we'll get to that here in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Top Rope Nation, episode 102. I'm Ryan Drosty, your host, joined by Kyle Ross and Justin Joint to break down all things pro wrestling like only we can do. And Kyle, you've been out of the loop for the last week. Crash course on pro wrestling over the last few hours to get back in the swing of things. Tell us about your week. What's going on in your life these days?
Oh, just came back from a nice trip in Michigan. Going on a vacation with my wife sometimes is not unlike the Trail of Tears, only with a camera, but and the forced relocation, of course. But it was a really fun time. We found a lot of kind of hidden gems in the Grand Rapids area. If any of our listeners are in Grand Rapids, I got recommendations, man.
Oh yeah, Founders Brewing, of course.
Yeah, if you got kids or if you just want breweries too, we hit the best of both worlds. My 22-ish month-old daughter has been to about 10 breweries in the last 5 days. So,
hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
break her in early, get her ready to take some trips with mom and dad and sit there while they indulge themselves in some adult beverages.
And I never thought I would ever say this, but like I really do appreciate the ones that are more accommodating. You know, that actually like have high chairs and actually aren't like frowning when you bring a child in. Although I can understand. If I didn't have a child, I'd probably be like, what are you fucking doing?
I actually went to a brewery here in town the other day. I saw on, I think, Facebook that they had tapped a new beer I'd never had. So me and my wife put the two kids in the car and went there just to try the beer with both kids and then left. So got to do what you got to do, man. Yeah,
small plate and one beer and you're kind of in and out, man. It's the way it goes.
I did just check. Yes, we do have listeners in Michigan. I was checking as you saw me reaching out my computer. I was checking our statistics. So hello out there in Michigan. Kyle was among you this week, but he's back in Ohio. Glad to have Kyle in the program. Justin Joint, one eye on the NBA Finals tonight as we record. What else is going on in your life, Justin?
Supposed to go to a family reunion this weekend, and naturally we got a call from daycare that the kid threw up, and so the wife's been taking care of him all day, and now we're kind of in limbo, waiting to find out what we're going to do tomorrow.
So we shouldn't panic if here on Patreon, as we're live streaming video tonight, we see you like jump up and you got a kid, and it's like that scene from Team America World Police where there's just like vomit spraying everywhere.
Yes.
I won't panic if I see that. I'll just know that's what's going on at the Joint household.
I just can't believe they're showing Monday Night Raw at daycare these days.
That was good. Nice. We're going to get into that, guys. Speaking of a sickness, let's try to diagnose what's wrong with WWE these days. We'll get to that here in just a second.
And you guys said that you want to cap this at a 60-minute podcast?
Yeah, we're going to try.
Okay.
We're going to try. So with that being said, guys, again, I think I said this last week. It's no longer iTunes. So let me say, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, hit subscribe, leave us a review, leave us that 5-star rating. We'd greatly appreciate it. Same thing, Stitcher Radio, leave us a review on there. We don't have too many on Stitcher. So if you're listening there, we'd appreciate the 5-star. We're also on Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, wherever podcasts are found. topropenation.com. You can find our merchandise links. We got all kinds of t-shirts. We got mugs. We've got pins, whatever you need to support the show. I just sent out a couple days ago some t-shirts to I sent Kyle one. I sent 2 of our new patrons of the show their free t-shirts, which, by the way, got to mention that if you sign up for our Patreon page before the end of June, so June 30th, we'll send you a free Top Rope Nation t-shirt, courtesy of Pro Wrestling Tees, in the mail. And no strings attached. You want to just try it out for a month. See if you like our Patreon page. You get exclusive access to our live feed as we record each and every Thursday night. Get the exclusive video feed that is never posted to the general public. So that is a bonus there. We also post our show notes. So what I'm looking at on my iPad right now, you can see what we use as we record, get a little behind the scenes access. And then, of course, the exclusive show. So Top Rope Nation Classics, which we just recorded about a week and a half ago, a review of Bash at the Beach 96, 90 minutes on that. A great show. The only way you can hear that is on our Patreon page, patreon.com/Top Rope Nation. You join the $5 a month tier to get exclusive access to those shows like Top Rope Nation Classics, Top Rope Nation Extra. And on Top Rope Nation Extra, we'll be reviewing each and every WWE pay-per-view, AEW pay-per-view every month, exclusive to Patreon. $5 a month. You get the free shirt. You get the free sticker. Try it out. See if you like it. And I got to give a shout out. We got a brand new patron the other day, Gabe C. Gabe, thanks for joining up there on patreon.com/Top Rope Nation. Greatly appreciate it. We'll get that shirt out to you in the mail and the sticker very soon. So WWE wise, guys, as we went to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight, it was a little bit of a chore coming up with an agenda, because usually we are pretty heavy on WWE. I guess you wouldn't know that from the last couple of weeks. We've been kind of trying to keep our distance, but we got a pay-per-view on the horizon. We got to talk some WWE, and what a mess it has been. It is very difficult to be motivated to watch WWE television these days. And we're 6 months out. I think, Kyle, I'm going to let you talk about this, but there was a tweet we were looking at, which was a video clip from Raw about 6 months ago.
Yeah, I was going to say the video clip. I guess, it's not just a tweet. It was a big deal they made on Raw. Segments 6 months ago.
You linked to the tweet. It's the video clip from Raw. We had all the McMahons in the ring that night. And Kyle, what was the general message to the WWE viewing audience that night?
Well, I think a lot of people remember it. It was Shane, Vince, Stephanie, and Hunter all in the ring, basically apologizing for the previous couple weeks, months of WWE programming, and saying they promised to be better. They heard the fans and they're going to be better.
Fail.
6 months removed from that, I think you can make a pretty clear argument that not only is the product not changed for the better, it's universally being hailed as worse. And that's pretty crazy to think about. I mean, the build to Mania, okay, they threw the fans somewhat of a bone, right? In that they go with Seth, Kofi, and Becky. We talked about this a lot, particularly the latter two, not originally scheduled for those spots. But, I wonder about this, because we talked about this a lot, and you can go back in our archives, listen to the previous shows, hear about this. They focus so much on manipulating the audience on a week-to-week basis on that road to WrestleMania. I think they forgot to think about any follow-up. And, not to toot my own horn, but toot. Because the week after that Superstar shakeup, I said, what are the big matches this promotion is going to build to? What are your SummerSlam main events? What's the big picture in the World Wrestling Federation? And my God, I think the answer is they don't have one.
Mm-mm.
And it has become so obvious, and more than anything, I think, that plagues WWE, because you hear about this. Batista just gave an interview talking about this. The Moxley interviews make this readily apparent. They're so focused on the week to week, and there's so many changes that just don't matter in the big picture, that they've forsaken the forest for these meaningless trees, to use an old analogy. And it's quite depressing, really, because you said it, it's not fun to watch WWE television anymore. And there's 5 hours of first run television a week.
It's quite the time commitment, especially if you're a new fan, to get into it and to follow this, especially when on the television shows, it feels like nothing's really happening of consequence. That's the big problem. Like, there's nothing, can't miss. You get good matches here and there. Like, there was a good 6-man, I thought, on Raw this week, but overall, if you don't watch it, you don't really miss out on anything.
No, and there's good individual performances too. You'll say, like, oh, I really enjoyed what this person did this week. And that's true. Well, we're all in agreement here. There's a lot of talent on this roster, but none of it matters big picture. Like if you miss something like 6 months from, the worst thing I think that could have happened to pro wrestling is, remember all those articles that when it, first really started getting popular 20 years ago, and like Rolling Stone, Austin was on the cover. You got a lot of articles. TV Guide gave them the cover. When they started referring to it as a male soap opera, oh, it's like a soap opera, but for men. I think that was the worst, not the worst, but it was such a terrible thing because in many ways it is like a male soap opera. Like, we're all married, right? I don't know if your guys' wives watch soap operas. Mine actually doesn't, but we've all been in relationships probably with women who have, right? And if you ever like watch these soap operas, like you can almost like you can watch it once and it's like, this is stupid. And then like 6 months later, maybe you see it again. You're like, these people are doing the same shit the last time I watched this 6 months ago. I feel that's what WWE's become.
Oh yeah.
It's just a bunch of people doing the same shit for 6 months with no forward advancement.
Mm-hmm. Justin, you've been pretty vocal on the program about being on a kind of self-induced WWE boycott. So explain to our listeners what brought that about, and are you even close to jumping back into watching Raw or SmackDown live? Because I know you do keep up with the product and everything, but you try to avoid it on television these days.
Yeah, I got to a point where I was just miserable watching it, and I realized I was falling behind on all sorts of other stuff. I like to watch or read, and so I just decided to stop watching until I thought, if I heard it was good again, or if they're making advancements or making changes or shaking things up. But I still read the synopsis of Raw and SmackDown. I still read reviews. If I do hear about a really good match, I will go back and watch it. I've watched all the Firefly Fun Houses, but it's 5 hours of time that I'm not willing to commit to bad television. Instead, I spent my Monday and Tuesday, with Deadwood and Big Little Lies and Fleabag, fantastic show. So I'd just rather do that. I don't have enough free time to spend 5 hours being miserable.
Yeah, there's just so much competition for eyeballs these days. We talk about it in our text threads all the time. There's so much great television. You just got into that. And you're talking about hours and hours of programming there, too. We're not talking about a movie here or there, but we're talking about all these great television series that are out there that everyone wants to watch, whether it's Netflix or HBO Go or Amazon Prime or Hulu. Like, there's so much vying for your attention. What's going to draw you in to watch 3 hours of Raw and SmackDown when you can watch one of these award-winning series every week?
And that's what's amazing, because Vince has said that they're not competing against other wrestling promotions. They're competing against all other content, and they're just putting out some of the worst content there is right now.
They're failing badly. If that's the case. Yeah.
I would say that is such a key point that just to make, because we're not having this conversation if Raw and SmackDown are good. Obviously, right. By design, because it's, 5 hours. Yes. Okay. Well, you always get 5 hours of TV is really tough. Well, then you shouldn't have 5 hours. Mm-hmm. And by the way, do we think that the TV will benefit when SmackDown goes back to Friday? Like, is it bad to have the shows back-to-back days?
I want to say it certainly doesn't help, but there for a long time, it was that second show, the SmackDown, that was consistently the most entertaining one, for what, a solid year at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll help them or not, but I mean, they're definitely in trouble. You look at these television ratings now. I know all of TV is down. Raw didn't do well this week, but I think they were still like 7th on cable or something like that.
And SmackDown was actually number 1 on Tuesday, despite the fact that it was down worse than Raw.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
But if you break it down further, there are problems, and it comes about in the age groups that are watching the show. I mean, pro wrestling is not popular among teenagers right now. This is a massive, massive problem for them, because obviously as those kids get older and the older audience goes away, where's their core audience going to be? And I can't remember if we've talked about this on the show or if we were talking off air before, but I'll say it again if it wasn't on the show. I teach school during the school year. I'm around teenagers all the time. I never hear kids talk about pro wrestling ever. Like, I could count on one hand the amount of times I've heard wrestling references in the last 5 years. Like, they're just not interested. And I've talked about this with other people, and I've had people try to contrast what I'm saying with, well, it's because wrestling's fake and this generation's like way more interested in MMA and stuff. And it's like, that is not the reason, because there was always real sports and competition. Like, people watch boxing. Everyone knew wrestling was fake in the 90s and the 80s, but it was still massively popular. If you produce a good product, people will watch. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that it's pre-rehearsed or anything like that. I mean, there was always competition. There was Ali, there was Tyson, but pro wrestling was still doing good during those eras. And I feel kind of like wrestling is skipping a generation. Whereas if you look at when we were growing up, we had that boom period in the 80s. We had the boom period in the 90s. And like, kids born since the late 90s have never experienced a pro wrestling boom period, and they don't know what that's like. And they're just completely checked out. And that is, I think, a huge problem WWE is going to have to overcome. We talk about the lapsed fans with AEW and them trying to get them back from the 90s. That's an older crowd. That's a admirable goal for them. But I think the big challenge is pulling in the teenagers and even the 20 somethings that are just not at all interested in wrestling.
Great rant on someone who is just so concerned with the plight of America's youth on a daily basis. I really, my hat's off.
It's true. I'd love to talk to the kids about wrestling, but nobody is interested. They're not. No. It's startling.
So this was I remember the conversation you're referring to, and it was an off-air conversation. So, I remember you opened my eyes because we were talking about an article. I think it was a Bixen Spin article on Deadspin, where WWE, there's this illusion, and in some regards it is big, but there's this illusion that WWE is doing well, right? They're getting this huge deal from Fox, and they're moving to network TV this fall. Like, you would think, just based solely on that they're doing very well right now. But anyone who follows the product knows the product stinks. There's a lot of key metrics that are down. So no, this isn't any kind of boom period. And I think WWE, the one area they have done a good job in, but I think it's maybe coming to cost, and we'll talk about this, is like sort of their corporate friendliness. Like, they do have a section on ESPN.com, which was not the case in the Attitude Era. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now ESPN.com did not exist in the 1980s, obviously, so we can't compare it to that. But so I think there are like these things people are like, oh, WWE's doing really well, but it really isn't, obviously, as we know. And you brought up the point that 10 years ago, okay, would any of the three of us think 2009 WWE is great? Like, do any of us look fondly back at that period?
I wasn't watching.
Okay, well, there you go. Okay, no one knows. But to your point, Ryan, what you just talked about, I remember I threw out 2009 example. And you said, oh, your students back then were talking John Cena. They were talking Randy Orton. Mm-hmm. And now you're saying the students, they're not talking about anybody.
No, I mean, if anyone's name comes up, it's John Cena. And usually, it might be in regarding to a movie. It might be that prank call that everyone still gives play, with the John Cena theme song playing. I've heard him play that before and stuff. But, someone might make a John Cena reference here or there, just because he is kind of a household name at this point. But no, I've never heard anyone talk about Randy Orton even these days, or Roman Reigns, or any of the stars today, AJ Styles, none of that at all.
Because you can argue that there are no stars today.
Yeah, we're going to get into that too, because that is could be a good discussion point later on that we've got on our agenda here. But I do really feel pretty strongly they've skipped a generation, and this is going to be a problem for years and years to come. How do you draw them in? Because there's so much competition, probably more so than ever before. Because you think about when wrestling was so popular, you could only watch what was on TV at the time. There was no on demand, there was no streaming, there was no YouTube. So there wasn't a ton. I mean, at that time, what do we have? Maybe 70 cable channels in the late 90s ish, around there. And so, like, yeah, there's Monday Night Football and stuff, and there might be a few good shows on, but there wasn't like dozens and dozens of award-winning shows that you could play at your fingertips. And that's the big problem right now, So as we get into the problems here, what's the major, if we think about the major cause of what's wrong with WWE TV right now, the big problem, why does it suck so badly?
Okay, first of all, do we agree that like the TV is the main? I mean, it starts with the TV, right? I should say that. Yeah. It all starts with the TV, right? It's just bad. Like you said, meaningless. It's 5 hours of meaningless television per week, which wears on an audience. And here's the key. We talk about this AEW show that we did, Double or Nothing. People went in wanting to like that show. WWE, a big problem they have is everyone, like, even if it is good on an occasional week, people just think the product sucks. Mm-hmm. And they can't get over that right now because, generally speaking, the product isn't very good. Yeah.
So how do we fix this? And, we're talking about television is the main issue. Nothing means anything. It's just, it feels like you're a hamster running on a wheel every week. You just watch and nothing of consequence happens. Like, where do you start? How do you fix this? We're on the writing team, or we're one of the big wigs behind the scenes here in WWE. Like, what changes would we make right off the bat? Any thoughts here?
I mean, it's all the obvious stuff. It's Vince McMahon's got to go away. They've got to change their creative. They've got to make it possible for wrestlers to have more input. They've got to make it possible to have long-term storytelling. They need to stop with all the BS champions losing in non-title matches, 50-50 booking. Everything is just shades of gray. Barely know who are heels and who are baby faces because they're flip-flopping every month. Frankly, I was always for the brand split. There was a way to make that work. If they set an actual creative side to one and a completely different set to the other, and then they made the shows completely different, and I mean completely different. You know how like in WWE camera side, everybody comes in on the left. Hell, for SmackDown, have everybody come in on the right. Set up on the other side of the arena. But frankly, with the wild card rule, there is no brand split anymore. And at this point, they just as well scrap it, and we're back to square one.
Do you guys remember when they had the ECW program that they were producing in the mid 2000s? They did actually kind of change the look. Like they switched the camera so it was straight on from the entranceway. And they actually did give the show a different look to make it kind of seem like it was authentic ECW back in the day. I think those are all great points. And I think they kind of did that a little bit with SmackDown. Like they had different camera angles when they started the brand split, but they've just completely given up on all of that. Raw and SmackDown look identical now.
Yeah, that was all like, oh, look at this. And it's like, but it's like the most like trivial difference. Yeah. Like, look, we're going to give you a different camera angle on this show. And I mean, that is like something like, but like, the shows look exactly the same. Mm-hmm. Except for the fact that, you have Raw draped on one, SmackDown on the other. The pay-per-views all look the same.
The stage is exactly the same.
Except for
just different things on the screen.
Yeah. I agree basically with everything Justin said. The brand extension. Here's, a line I've used on this show many times the last 2 months. Better in theory than in practice. We hear all these reasons why there should be a brand extension. And they're not bad reasons. But they never work. Oh, well, this will give more talent the opportunity to shine. That's never happened. Mm-hmm. And not just this brand extension, folks. Remember, they did this once before and it failed. It failed. Like, it was like, and they went to a soft brand extension, very much like they're doing now with this wild card rule. I think the timeline, we talked about this before. I think it was like after 5 years, they started doing that. They're way ahead of that timeline now. And it's funny because this whole wildcard rule came out because the networks. Raw was pissed, or USA was pissed, that Roman Reigns wasn't going to be on anymore. And, we were going back and forth on this text. The wildcard rule is basically a silly reaction to something that we're all clamoring for, which is there should be a roving champion. Like, basically, it's just like, well, it's not a wild card rule. It's just like, well, how can we find a way to get the stars on both shows? Well, the easiest way is to have roving champions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of guys have brought that up.
Yeah, we talked about it right from the beginning. Right, we started the show right when the brand split started, and I think one of the first episodes we did, we talked about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, you know, you talk about what can we think of. I think this is a simple one. The championship situation needs to be restructured. You have one world champion. I've brought this up before. You know what lapsed fans ask a lot? My buddies ask a lot when, like, they come over to watch wrestling, if they're just over and I'm watching it and they just want to join. Who's the champion? And when you I've said this so many times, when you tell them, there's a Raw champion, they look at you like, what?
Yeah,
they look at it like that's dumb. They don't, and then you're like, oh well, in the '80s they had 2 touring brands, and you know that was very successful. They don't give a fuck about that.
No, it's like from the beginning of time, who's the world champion? There's one world champion. One.
And that theoretically should create a star because that's your world champion.
Yeah.
You know, so that's, and they should have one women's champion. Okay. It was a great way to make Becky Lynch seem special. They already pissed away that. They should be one men's tag team. I mean, the idea, come on, let's be honest here. 2 tag team champions, stop it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they have the one women's tag team championship, but that belt is about as special as, you know, this freaking rock sitting on my desk right now, holding my computer together.
Yeah. I think long-term booking wise too, one of the big problems with this, because we're talking about there's not long-term booking. It seems to me the only long-term booking going on revolves around the McMahon family. And this is another huge, just get them off of TV. Is there anyone out there that like looks forward to seeing Stephanie and Shane on television? Like anyone at all? Why is Shane McMahon taking up so much television time? Why is there this rumor out there that Shane McMahon could become WWE champion? My God, does anybody want to see that? I mean, I don't care how you spin it. I saw people on Twitter today like, oh, I could be convinced it could be a good thing if he no, there's no circumstance at all where Shane McMahon winning the world championship is a good idea. I don't care what you say. So just get them off of television. I don't know what the obsession is of always making this about the McMahon family and the authority angles. It's just so overblown. That is another big problem. I think no long-term booking, and the only long-term booking that there is seems to revolve around Shane McMahon, and that's about it.
Goes back 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I raised a stink and nobody wanted to hear it at the time because WWE TV was still pretty good. Still actually really good. It was one of their best periods. You know, you're getting a lot of bangers on pay-per-view. When the decision was made at WrestleMania 2000 to build that main event around a McMahon in every corner instead of the performers, that set us down a primrose path.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, go back and watch, do your history. That match and the promotion of it is what led to the McMahons. And look, it's their fucking promotion, so I guess you can do whatever you want with it. But they became the stars. They were bigger than the wrestlers themselves. And that is and I'm sorry, I disagree with that concept.
You know why? Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that was it.
You know why it worked 20 years ago, and I don't know if they think like for some reason this is going to make the product hot again because it did at the time. Well, it was number one because of Steve Austin, and number two because at the time it was like a new thing, like this transition. Vince went from being an announcer. We're growing up a kid. Nobody knew that Vince McMahon owned the promotion. Like when you guys were kids, you didn't know that. You thought Vince McMahon was just an announcer. Now, I know people that were plugged in and stuff and older than us probably knew. But for a long time, like I just knew Vince McMahon as the announcer. And when then all of a sudden Vince McMahon, the announcer that you grew up with, is getting involved in storylines, and then he's getting shoved and he's getting the stunner on Raw in the fall of 97. Like it was so crazy because he was just an announcer. Like I said, he was out of all of this for all those years, but now like he's been on television. Stephanie's been on television. Shane's been on television constantly for 20 years. And there's nothing special about it. There's no novelty about it. It was like a novelty thing back then. And it's not relevant anymore.
I think it's unrealistic to expect them to disappear from TV completely. And I
But
think
they should, don't you think?
they should
for the
not
most
be,
part.
Okay, so we'll get into my outside the box idea, and it actually does feature them. Because I feel if you're on the creative process and you're not placating to their egos, you're probably not long for that job anyway. And I try to take a realistic approach, but the issue is everyone knows they kind of run the show. And what's interesting is when they're not on, back to this brand extension in its current iteration, who's running these shows right now? It just seems like random things are happening and they just put a random McMahon on.
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss something? Raw has no GM. SmackDown's, Shane, I guess, is still in charge of SmackDown, but he appears on Raw regularly. So I don't think he's blue through and through anymore. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, someone had a good tweet the other day where they had all these big stars in WWE or great performers that haven't been on television or wrestled in weeks and weeks and weeks. And then you look at how much television time Shane McMahon has got during that same time period. And it's just jaw dropping, just mind boggling. They do this.
So I was going to save, because we're going to do our Stomping Ground preview next week. And I was going to save my Shane McMahon thoughts for then. But yeah, it's him beating Roman. I don't care what you think about Roman Reigns. And I'm not even talking to you guys, I'm talking about anyone listening to this podcast. That is so unacceptable. If Roman Reigns is to be your top guy, to have him lose, I don't care how BS it is. It's unacceptable, especially when the guy's struggling in that spot because of other poor ways you booked him. Look at how they booked the following 4 people in the last 2.5 months. Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre, Miz, Shane McMahon. Shane has basically won his feud with Miz, although Miz is trying to get this match back, right? Okay. Roman beat Drew McIntyre in a blah match, which kind of really hurt Drew and, put him at a certain level, right? So Roman's beating Drew, but he loses to Shane. So you have now hurt The Miz, Roman Reigns, and Drew McIntyre, 3 people who should be cornerstones of your product to get over Shane McMahon. And we know he's going to put somebody over at some point, but is it all worth it?
Because who cares? Shane McMahon putting someone over means nothing, in the grand scheme of things.
And here's the thing too. Elias, okay, I don't think it's a main event gimmick, but he's over, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did at Money in the Bank a minute job to Roman Reigns, yet Shane McMahon beats him.
Yeah. No long-term direction here, Kyle. They weren't thinking about that at the time because they didn't know what they were doing 2 weeks from now.
That was the first thing Justin said, long-term booking.
Yeah.
If I'm on the creative team, I'm like, look, man, okay, we got the big 4. Our job after the dust is kind of settled from the last one is we've got to put together not fucking next week's Raw, okay? There's so many guys on this roster. You can just give these guys a chance. You can do a Raw instead of just zoning in on these dumb scripted promos no one remembers. You need to focus on what is our SummerSlam main event going to be, and a decision needs to be made, and it needs to be stuck to. Now, sometimes things will happen, and you do change an injury. Somebody gets hot out of nowhere. Okay, maybe you modify. But I always say this. What I love watching about older, 80s WWF is, my God, you can see the confidence in the booking. They knew where they wanted to go, and they went there. And I know it's not apples to apples anymore because the television's so different. Everything was pre-taped back then. It's all live now. But it's coming up with a long-term decision and sticking to it. That is the first thing that needs to be done in the creative process.
Okay.
In my opinion.
All right. So consolidating the titles, the long-term storyline direction, I would say practically getting rid of the scripted promos too. I think that's been an issue for a long time. You give guys talking points, but what did they have Dusty Rhodes down there for years teaching promo class for? If they get up to the main roster and all it's going to be is just read the script. Yes, I agree. If you can't cut a scripted promo, I got news for you. Find another line of work. Moxley talked about that in his promo. He couldn't be more correct. Yeah. Or in his interview with, I couldn't remember if it was with Keller or with Jericho.
But he said that, like, to me, and, you know, there's this worry, oh, they might say something terrible and it'll hurt a sponsor. Well, then you're fucking fired.
Yeah.
Okay, if you do what I just did and swore on TV, you're gone. You're gone. Okay, that's the thing. Okay, you know, if you swear without permission, you're gone.
Yeah.
Or you're like suspended. You're moved off television. It's that simple. Like, and that frees people up to think about long-term things rather than, you know, oh, are we going to say suffer and succotash or pooper scooper? Who the fuck cares about that?
How many hours are spent backstage talking about this inconsequential stuff? Justin, still awake over there?
I'm still here.
Let's pull Justin in this conversation. So, what do you have to add on solutions here? What would you like to see him do that we haven't discussed yet? Anything?
I mean, no, I already kind of gave you my 2 cents on the whole thing. I think we're seeing the same 10 to 15 guys every show because of the wild card rule, when we've talked about it before. This is one of the deepest rosters ever. And I find it very, and this is real. I think this says to me, it's all signs point to creative. Deepest roster ever. I find it hard to believe that they couldn't tell interesting or good stories with the talent they have in that mid to lower roster. Those are all guys, or not all, but some have been guys that have been top guys in other promotions that have proven themselves before in WWE, and they don't do anything interesting with them. And it's kind of like what you guys already talked about. It's because they're overly scripted and they have no direction. I mean, look, EC3. I mean, what a waste.
Right. Exactly.
For the silliest reason too, because he was put into a horrible situation opposite Dean Ambrose. And first of all, I never understood why EC3 was supposed to be a babyface. Top 1%. I mean, do you have like, you're not paying attention to 2019 politics? I mean,
I think that tells us a lot about Vince.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But, you know, and what's worse, to building off Justin's point, is some of these guys, it's not just that they're being used poorly. They're not being used at all. Some of these people, they're collecting dust and catering. Some of these guys, you know what, WCW was obviously not a well-run organization for basically all of its existence. But you know what? When you go back and watch some old WCW sometimes, a charm of it is they were so clueless at times. And this was especially true in like the Nitro era when things were going downhill. I mean, it's how Chris Jericho got over it in the first place. They would just send these lower card guys out there, be like, guys, fill up time and do whatever the hell you want. Because Hogan and Nash won't do a job tonight, and I have to spend all the time placating their egos. So Jericho, you get 10 minutes, cut a promo, I don't know, say whatever you want. And he got himself over doing that. I mean,
isn't that how every base magic moment or superstar has been born in wrestling? Is just because they've said something random or done something random that the crowd latches onto, and that doesn't happen anymore because they're being handcuffed. I keep using this same phrasing over and over again.
That's exactly right. I mean, the biggest boom period they had, Steve Austin, that was basically an accident. Triple H was going to win the King of the Ring that year. Austin wins because Triple H is being punished for the click thing at MSG. He utters the Austin 316 line. Boom. Austin becomes one of the biggest stars in wrestling history. I mean, that couldn't happen these days. It doesn't seem like, anyways.
Yeah, and when you do get something organically over, Rusev Day, for instance. All right, you can argue maybe they never even went with it, which is an argument I'll listen to. But when they put their claws into something that gets organically over, they just ruin it. Because it's like, well, we've got to, okay, you got this over, but now we're going to put our fingerprints on what you did. No, keep your fingers away from it.
Exactly.
Stop fingering everybody.
Yeah, stop fingering everybody. Yeah. John Cena's already got a boner half the time during
this match. We're going to talk about John Cena in just 1 second, but there's something that goes along with that. But Kyle, I want you to get into your idea, because I agree. It's in our show notes here. I agree with this idea. I think it's a good one. But kind of your plan to fix things here, the final point.
Well, I just wanted to go back to one last thing with Justin. What Justin said about guys not being used and it's being the same guys on television. He's completely right, and it's also completely unacceptable. With all these guys on TV, if I was somebody in creative, and you would hope that some of these underused guys are bitching, because if they're not bitching, that actually is disappointing for me. But if they are bitching, I'd be like, all right, you two, you guys think you're so good and I should be using you and I'm wrong, or whatever. I mean, hopefully the people in creative are like, yeah, man, I feel for you. But let's just say it's a combative situation, okay? Be like, why don't you go out there, you two, and prove it to me? Here's a blank canvas. We got this 3-hour program. I got 10 minutes to kill this week. Just pick 2 guys. Luke Harper and EC3. Go out there and have a 10-minute match. Show me what you can do if you think you're so good. And if it sucks, it sucks. But if it's good, okay.
Yeah, you know what? If they're not speaking out now, I think they will be soon, because now that there is a viable alternative where they can make a good living, I think people are going to be more likely to speak up and not really fear repercussions.
Yeah. Another quick question I had, because Batista gave this interview and he was talking about some of his frustrations. They're very similar to things we've heard from other guys. He's done this in the past, harps on this PG stuff. Like, he thinks like WWE going PG has been this huge detriment. Is that overblown in your guys' opinion? Like, if the product was good, like, can you do a good, can pro wrestling be, let me phrase the question like this. Can pro wrestling be successful in 2019 as a quote unquote PG product?
I mean, I think it should be able to. We saw like it with Double or Nothing. A little color adds a lot to a match. But that's just one match. You're not going to be doing that every week until you're oversaturated with it. But yeah, you know what? There's lots of good PG content out there. So yeah, they should be able to.
I'm not looking for a return to the Attitude Era, but I do think you need a little bit of an edge these days, especially if you bring in like the UFC comparison, like I talked about with the kids and all that, like UFC. But wrestling can still draw an interest, but I do think even just like a little bit of colorful language here and there helps out. Like, get over a little bit of aggression, to quote Vince, ruthless aggression. If you have a little bit more risque promos, I think that helps out. It seems more realistic to people because people swear when they're pissed at each other.
Yeah. But no, I agree. I think like they're being more like hostility to the promos, but I also think, to counter, like, if you just said, okay, guys, like, start swearing now, but you didn't change anything else about WWE, it wouldn't be good.
No, but I mean, being allowed to go there a little bit, they're pretty regulated. Well, they're literally regulated by what the scripts say, but just a little bit. And then the color, like, at AEW, the color in the Rhodes match, that did add a lot, and you don't see that from WWE anymore. So I'm not looking for like barbed wire and women taking their tops off and stuff like the Attitude Era, but I do think a little bit of an edge is a good thing. This day and age, look at the television products they're competing with, especially on the streaming networks and HBO and everything, and you do have the the PG-13 level. So,
and isn't that one little thing you could do is actually have the 3rd hour of Raw, have it be PG-13, like, have that one little tweak.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you should be able to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like it's some hokey car. I mean, maybe it is, but like, it's not like it's like this like children's program the way it's constituted now. I think there's bigger issues than that. Like, people always needs to not be PG.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's the biggest issue. I
agree that there are certain things you should do in wrestling that aren't PG that absolutely help, but I don't think it's the biggest issue at all.
No,
I wanted to say that. I know that wasn't in the notes, but that was something that came up that I noticed.
Okay, so tell us about this plan for Raw and SmackDown you had, Kyle.
All right, I think the time, that Justin kind of alluded to this earlier, that Raw and SmackDown need to be different shows. If you're going to do a brand split, And the question, earlier in the notes, I said, do you modify the brand extension or do you do away with it entirely? I think there's arguments for both. If you're going to have two shows, though, and you want people to watch them both, and, now with this deal, two different shows, obviously that's a goal. I do think you need to have some form of have them be brands. And to make them different, how do you do this? Because if Vince is ultimately in control of both, it's just not they'll never be that different because it's still filtered in through one person's creative vision. I think the time is now that Triple H, that Hunter needs to be given one of the brands. And he needs to run it, how he wants to. Now, I think a lot of people are going to think it'd be like NXT. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. I don't think there's any guarantee that it would be, that he would run either if he got Raw or SmackDown. I mean, there are some elements I think he'd bring. I don't think it would be a total similarity. But I think you need to have different creative teams, like Justin said. They're absolutely. Remember initially in the brand split, 2002, when Paul Heyman had the book for SmackDown. It was quite good, and they took it away from him because, guys were getting injured, but there were a lot of other reasons why that book was taken away from him. That was unfortunate. But you have to have different creative teams. And to me, Hunter seems to have a slightly, and if he's that upset about it, again, prove it. Mm-hmm. Prove it. And as far as divvying up the rosters, look, I almost think Hunter should get Raw. I'll tell you why. We talked about something on this show months ago, and I can't believe I'm going to do this. This will be off the front. I think I need to apologize to Dave Shearer. Okay, that's something I never thought I'd say. Because he wrote that article, remember we talked about it, like Vince hates his roster. And we were all kind of like, yeah, that's a little out of left field. I think it might be true. I think a lot of these guys not getting over is a self-fulfilling prophecy from Vince McMahon. I think he looks at this roster. I don't think he's impressed with this roster at all. I think when the three of us sit here and say, oh, this is like the most talented roster WWE's ever had, I think Vince McMahon would say no way.
Vince is back there like, give me Hillbilly Jim.
Yeah. I just think he looks at this roster and he just sees a lot of guys. And you always hear Vince doesn't get these guys. And so if that's the case, those guys should not be on Vince McMahon's brand. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. If there's guys that Vince is like, oh, I love this guy, I want this guy on my show, he should be on Vince's show.
Yeah. Now, this actually flows in really nicely to the next topic because we're talking about stars and WWE not really having the transcendent stars. And we got into this a little bit earlier with the discussion about teenagers and not being interested in pro wrestling. But John Cena did an interview recently. I'm going to read the quote from him, and I'm going to throw it to both of you to see if you agree with him or not. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at this or not, but I'm going to read it for our listeners. So talking about whether or not there was going to be someone on the roster that could be the next John Cena, Cena said, for the longest time, if you consider WWE a band, there's been one front person of the band. I think that dynamic is changing. It is because the audience is too diverse. I think older males are watching it, younger kids are watching it, females are watching it. The audience is so diverse. With a diverse audience, it's tough to universally please someone. And then he got into this idea about how in the 80s, families watched. Hulk Hogan was great for that period. In the 90s, there was more teenagers, and Austin and The Rock were great for that. But now he's saying it's such a global product and it's a diverse audience. It's different. He said, quote, I don't think there's a universal figure that will lead the company forward. I think as the company grows and especially expands globally, you're going to have like a super friends of the WWE, which is like people who are essentially fighting for equal share of popularity. I think the band essentially will have 10 lead singers of every different race, creed, color, sex, and ethnicity. Do you guys agree that the era of having a top star is over and it's because the audience is too diverse? What do you think, Justin?
I don't think it's the audience. I think that's how WWE is running things now. I don't know if they really even want a top star. I mean, you can see it in the 50-50 booking. They've kind of tried to do it with Roman Reigns, but I mean, you look at a lot of the past superstars. I mean, You can make an argument Hulk Hogan was kind of manufactured by Vince. But then you have guys like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels who, I attached myself to them early on, and it was because they had a little bit something special. They were a little bit different from everybody else, and they just kind of became stars organically. Steve Austin, he's somebody that I think anybody who watched wrestling could kind of see something special in him, even when he was stunning Steve. It took some time, but eventually his stardom just it popped out. I mean, because it was there. Same with The Rock. And John Cena might have been the last one, but all those people had a little bit of freedom to let their inner stars out in their own way. And I just don't think WWE allows for that kind of thing to happen anymore.
What do you think, Kyle? Too diverse for a top star again?
I hated Cena's rationale in that article. It just read like WWE corporate speak. It was like excuse me. I actually agree with the premise, but I hated everything he said to back it up, the premise up, because it just seemed like excuses for there not being any stars. Like, because if what Cena was saying was true, there would be stars right now. There would be 4 or 5 stars. There's not.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the super friends of the WWE right now?
Oh man, I guess you got Mr. Canada, Kevin Owens. Right?
Yeah, I don't
know. Like you got Kofi Kingston, you got AJ Styles from the Deep South.
Yeah, he is correct in the sense that a diverse audience does make it difficult for like one person to be universally loved at the level of a Hogan, an Austin, a Rock, even himself. Although John Cena obviously was, not universally loved. And I think the fact that he persevered through that and was such a star and such a mover for them, that was a curse, I think, on the current product, because WWE looked at it. Oh, well, this is the same thing with Roman. Oh, he's going to still be a big star. And I think they've done a shitty job of booking Roman, but I don't think Roman Reigns is John Cena. I just don't. There's something that he lacks compared to John Cena that has hurt him in that category.
So my biggest problem was the diversity argument. Do you guys really feel that the audience today is more diverse than it was in those other eras? Because what we talked about earlier with them skipping a generation, I think you make the argument it's less diverse. There's a whole generation of kids that just are not interested in pro wrestling. Now, with women watching, I do think like Total Divas kind of opened the door for some women to watch the show. But if you watch in the Attitude Era, like, hell, look at the DX segments, look at WCW when they did the Search for the Nitro Girls and the Nitro parties and stuff. I think women, Justin, you've talked about one of your early girlfriends, the whole family watching Nitro. I think other periods in wrestling history when wrestling was really hot, you had both genders watching the show. I don't think that it's any more diverse now than it was in the 80s. Look at watch the Coliseum video on WrestleMania 3, and you can see a bunch of young guys tailgating in the Pontiac Silverdome's parking lot before the show, but then you had a lot of old people in the crowd too. It was always a diverse audience.
By the way, I love that fucking segment.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't get this. It was always a diverse audience.
Okay, this diversity. I don't like the way he explained it at all, because I think he's kind of wrong.
I think the way it's explained is wrong, because I think it's actually a pretty homogenous audience right now, where it's 30 to 40-year-old men are kind of the core audience, and they don't have the other generations like they used to.
Okay, the diversity is like this. There's basically 2 fan bases. It's not like, I don't look in terms of diversity. I don't look at it in terms of race, gender, whatever. There is just one clear dividing line in the WWE audience today. Hardcore wrestling fan, non-hardcore wrestling fan.
And the non-hardcore audience has shrunk drastically, like we've talked about in the past. Yeah.
And the issue is, when you're hot, you have a large non-hardcore, the hardcores are always going to be there. And the WWE has a problem right now. And we've seen it because, with these live shows, and I do sometimes feel for them in this regard, in that they have this all right, well, we want to book in a way to reach this casual audience. And the problem is you have to deal with an audience that right now is way more there's never been a time in wrestling history where the hardcore audience was more than 50% of your viewing audience. And it clearly is now. I don't know what the number is, but it's way more. So it's very hard to come up with someone who your hardcore audience is rejecting. So to me, I just think you can't do it. Like if you're hardcore, like you've got to just read I hate this expression. You got to read the tea leaves. If your hardcore audience is going to reject somebody, you can't fucking go with them because it's just going to look bad.
Yeah.
And Steve Austin, people forget Steve Austin, okay, was loved by the hardcore. It grew, that grew. It was not like, we're going to come up with this guy and he's really going to appeal to people that aren't watching wrestling now. Steve Austin really appealed to people that were watching wrestling at the time. There was a massive growth from 1997 to 1998. Massive. You could argue, you liked the TV better in 97, but way, way, way more people were watching in 1998. Mm-hmm. And that's because Steve Austin was like this force. He was like really, everyone's like, this guy is awesome. He was he was universally cheered. So that made it, people were like, oh, this guy's like really awesome. And then they did the angle with Tyson that crossed him over. And, the sky turned blue and the sun shined forever. So I do think like with this diversity thing, it's like, from their perspective, well, we want to put people for this casual audience too, but the hardcore shit on everything. Well, I don't know, man. That's what you got. And by the way, they've opened themselves up to that criticism. Say what you will. When you do stuff like Money in the Bank 2011, you're inviting that criticism on your program. You're basically acknowledging, your detachment from a portion of your audience, right?
Yeah.
So you're inviting that. So you can't have it both ways.
No, I agree. 100%. We're gonna shift gears here and go to a little bit of New Japan and All Elite, and then close off with Kyle's deep dive of the week. Any closing comments on the WWE situation here, guys?
No, but I do have a Dominion question for you guys.
Okay.
Well, I have just one, and we can bring it up for next week. It'll be a tease for next week. Because I can't think of a pay-per-view in recent times that would be more apropos to talk about this than WWE Stomping Ground. Our monthly pay-per-view is an outdated concept. We should talk about that next week when discussing that show, because boy, is that show the poster child for the answer yes.
Yep. I think that would be a great discussion next week. We're going to hit that hard. So if you're listening, tune in next week for that one. What's your Dominion question, Justin?
You guys are a little bit more plugged in than I am. I've been hearing different things about the way Dave Meltzer rated the Naito and Ibushi match. Like I saw one place where he wanted to give it 5 stars, but couldn't because of how, I don't know, violent it was or something. And then somewhere else where he didn't want to rate it at all. Mm-hmm. Do you guys know anything about that?
Yeah,
he's explain.
He said you could rate this match. I should get the exact quote.
I got it right here. He said, honestly, you could give this match anything from negative stars to 4 3/4,
which is possibly the largest star rating range I've ever heard in professional wrestling history.
Yeah, and then he got into the dangers and the apron spot and everything. So
those guys are too talented to be doing that shit, man.
Oh yeah. He doesn't actually have a rating at the end of the column like he does for all the other matches. Will Ospreay at Dominion, man. Will Ospreay having a hell of a year. Another 5-star match where he won the junior title from Dragon Lee in 20 minutes. That's a must watch. And then Jericho, I saw a lot of criticism of his rating on this one. So Okada beat Jericho. So no, we talked about this in the broadcast before. Jericho as an AEW talent will not have the IWGP heavyweight title, at least right now. But
he did work himself into another ring. He did work himself in another angle.
Tanahashi, he's gonna have a match with Tanahashi, which is kind of a dream match. But Meltzer gave that match 4 1/4. I saw a lot of criticism of Jericho's work in that match. He was he showed his age a little bit. He was a little slower. I don't know if it seemed a little high, but
yeah, I would say. I mean,
I would probably put it more around the 3.5 star range personally. But
I mean, he showed some. There was some stuff in the Omega match, Double or Nothing, that wasn't very good. There were some botches in that were real ugly. Look, I think that's too high. Nobody thinks that's a 4 1/4.
No, I was stunned when I saw that.
Dave, come on, man! Like even the people who like really, really like Okada matches, like all of them, like just like worship Okada. And I'm not an Okada worshiper. I think he can be very good, but I think like anyone else, he's got like any other top guy, he's developed a formula, and I think sometimes that formula can be overrated. Those people. I saw a lot of people I respect saying this was the worst Okada singles match they'd seen in a long time.
Yeah, and Okada is off the charts. He always has great matches, but this was definitely a step below him. No doubt about it. So we will we'll stay tuned to New Japan because the G1's on the horizon, like I let off the broadcast talking about. We did get some news at Dominion on the G1. So the former Hideo Itami, Kenta, debuted with New Japan, and he'll be entering the G1. We also found out that Moxley is going to be in the G1, so that's on the horizon. And
it was just announced he's going to be working Omega at All Out.
Yeah, so 2 matches announced for All Out. We've got the Page Jericho match to crown the promotion's first world champion, and then Omega and Moxley, which they set up at Double or Nothing. So
I disagree with Meltzer brushing off a fan question on Twitter about, is AEW booking themselves into a corner here with Moxley Omega? Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to lose, right? That this is the promotion of clean finishes, right?
Yeah.
So one of them's got to lose. And I guess you could make the argument, well, it's before TV, but Kenny Omega, going back to Dave's like, oh, Omega should like never lose if he's gonna be the big star of this promotion. Are you gonna have him go 0 for 2?
Yes.
Okay, well, is that smart?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Why?
Because you build him back up. Then he's not a known commodity to a large portion of the audience. John Moxley is, Jericho is. So you have those stars, and you have Omega lose 2 matches, and all of a sudden he can't come back from that. Come on.
I would actually argue that's why Omega would need to win, because I feel like if they're trying to draw in some of that general audience, they already buy Moxley as a star. But if Omega loses yet again, I don't know. I do think it's a risk to have him lose yet again.
Yeah, I don't think it's I think it's not like, if he goes 0-2, you're right, to Justin's point. It's not like he's done. Like, my God. Kenny Omega, he's been buried. He's done. His career's over. I think there's some optics, though. And I'd like to hear from the anti-WWE crowd explain that one away. The optics of having him lose to 2 former WWE guys. Mm-hmm. Is that what these people want? Are they cool with that? If so, whatever. If it works, it works. And I think there is an argument, well, the weekly TV's not on, so you could just always have Omega get his win back in front of a potentially larger audience against those 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. It'll be interesting to see how they book that. And there's ways to do it where Moxley would still look strong. But you do have 2 guys who are going to be getting cheered quite loudly, both of them. Heading into that match. So we shall see. But the tickets for All Out go on sale as we record this Thursday night, Friday morning. So as you're listening to this, you may have already got tickets. If so, congratulations. If not, it's definitely going to be a hard ticket. So we'll see what happens there. But we're expecting a very, very quick sellout for that show at the Sears Center.
John Cena knows something about a hard ticket, right? Hey,
We're not talking about that interview. Not on this broadcast. All right, Kyle. Let's get to your deep dive of the week.
Oh, you're not going to trash your girl Dana Warrior?
Well, we're already running long.
Okay.
I thought we'd cut that out. It's not a huge story. We tweeted about it. Check our Twitter page at Top Rope Nation. But
it was a big story. It was a big story on Twitter, and it was
Dana Warrior in the Ultimate Warrior face paint for Pride Month. The optics of that are terrible. Everybody knows the Ultimate Warrior had a terrible, terrible track record as it relates to human rights and the gay community. So, I mean, for her to stand up for the community is great. And, maybe she does believe that. But to put on the Warrior face paint and do it, that's pretty tone deaf. Leave the face paint off. My God, Dana.
Those quotes were real bad, weren't
they? There's some good replies.
I'm not going to repeat it. I mean, oh boy.
There are some very good replies to her tweet. But let's get to this deep dive. Kyle Ross, it's time for the I Love This Sport deep dive of the week. Take it away.
Okay. You know what I was thinking about the other day?
A lot of things.
Yes.
Some of which I probably cannot repeat aloud.
Okay. In some regards, now some people are going to jump on what as soon as they hear this. What are you, an idiot? In some regards, I was thinking, do you know what modern WWE reminds me of? 1993 WCW. What? How can that be? 1993 WCW lost so much money. What are you, an idiot? Hold on here. I'm talking about creatively. Obviously, we know, when people people always lose their mind when like Meltzer and Alvarez make the WCW comparisons with modern WWE because modern WWE has all these built-in guaranteed revenue streams. We get that. Let's look on the creative side, okay? Nobody at the time, and certainly in most of the years that followed, and probably even today, would argue that 1993 WCW was a good year, okay? But where it does kind of remind me of WWE? It's in that you had a pretty talented roster. Listen to these names: Vader on top, Ric Flair returns, Sting, Davey Boy Smith comes in. Cactus Jack breaks out as a single star. Hollywood Blondes. I mean, my God. I mean, Rick Rude. Dustin Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
The last gasp of Barry Windham, who we'll get to in a moment. Too Cold Scorpio could have been something. We'll get to him in a moment. But my point is, you had a lot of great individual performances in 1993. A lot of talented people. The booking stunk. Does this sound familiar? So, when the way wrestling is now with so much footage available, you can just go back and you can watch things in a vacuum. Like with 93 WCW, there's stuff you can go back because I was watching an Arn Anderson Steve Regal match, Lord Steven Regal match not too long ago. And I was like, this is pretty good. Like two all pros, but it doesn't change the fact that 93 WCW was not a successful promotion. And, the WWE, there's a lot of great individual performances, a lot of talented people. The booking stinks. So I wanted to think of a match from 93 WCW to share this week. And Justin, a few weeks ago, maybe even been a month ago, was asking about a good Barry Windham match to watch. And I think I referenced this in our text thread, and it's going to be our match of the week this week. Him and Too Cold Scorpio, Clash 23, can be found on the award-winning WWE Network. This is in many ways reminiscent of a modern WWE match in that you have the up-and-comer Scorpio against the veteran Windham. Spoiler alert, the up-and-comer loses. But the only comparison I can make to this would be like Shawn Michaels, Shelton Benjamin from Raw, that match, in the sense that that the up-and-comer looked really good in defeat. So, that's another thing too. We always, and again, here's the comparison to modern WWE. He went nowhere. Scorpio went nowhere after this match. Absolutely. He had a tag team with Marcus Bagwell where Marcus Bagwell danced very bad, but that's about it. So that's my deep dive of the week. Barry Windham, Too Cold Scorpio, Clash 23. Great fucking match. One of Barry's last great matches.
I like it.
Before he tore his knee and was never the same again.
Nice. Well, I'll be checking it out probably tonight as I edit this program, and after the NBA finals are over.
Looks like we got a close game here. I'm checking the fourth quarter.
But always like those deep dives from Kyle. Gives you something to check out on the WWE Network. You can tweet us your reactions to the match at Top Rope Nation, or send us an email, topropenation@gmail.com. Always love hearing from you guys. So with that said, I think it's going to be a pretty tight episode. I think we're going to take things home and prepare for previewing Stomping Grounds next week, which should be a hell of a broadcast. But no, seriously, we're going to talk about we're going to continue this discussion on what is wrong with WWE and try to solve that because you know what, somebody has to do it. So we'll take aim at it here on Top Rope Nation. Guys, always a pleasure. Justin, have a good evening, my friend.
You too. Go Canada.
Yes. Kyle, thanks for the deep dive as always. Appreciate that. Check these guys out at TRP Kyle and at Justin Joint. I am at Historical Ryan. And
I'm sending
Kyle, any parting words?
I'm sending the podcast page a great tweet right now.
Nice. All right. Check us out there at Top Rope Nation on Twitter. We're also on Instagram at Top Rope Nation there, and also Facebook as well. Just search Top Rope Nation in the search bar. And like I said at the beginning, hit up Patreon before June 30th. Join our $5 tier. Try it out for a month. You get a free t-shirt out of the deal. We'd love to have your support. And we'd love to read your name on the air like I am about to do. So thanks goes out to our producers of the show, Derek Chappelle, Kyle Ryan, Tim Jensen, Forrest Pierce, Sean Skelton, and the latest one, Gabe C. Very much appreciate your support. We will be back next week with Top Rope Nation episode 103. And then after that, the following weekend with a Patreon exclusive edition of Top Rope Nation Extra, where we review WWE Stomping Grounds. And we'll probably follow that up with another edition of Top Rope Nation Classics. So with that said, I'm Ryan Drosty for Justin Joint and Kyle Ross. Enjoy your weekend and enjoy professional wrestling wherever you are.
Peace.